Eleanor Montgomery stepped into Rosemary's Diner with the careful deliberation that came with her 83 years. The hostess recognized her immediately. After all, Eleanor was something of a local celebrity in Burlington, Vermont. Her late husband's real estate empire had made the Montgomery name synonymous with wealth in the small city, and her charitable foundation continued his legacy. "Your usual table by the window, Mrs. Montgomery?" the hostess asked with a practiced smile. Eleanor nodded, following slowly as her cane tapped against the worn linoleum floor. Tuesday lunches at Rosemary's had become her ritual over the past year. The diner was unpretentious, a stark contrast to the upscale restaurants her social circle frequented. But something about the honest food and genuine people kept drawing her back. As she settled into her seat, Eleanor's eyes wandered across the half-full diner. The usual crowd of locals chatted over coffee and sandwiches. A young mother struggled to keep her toddler seated. Two businessmen in wrinkled suits discussed something with animated gestures. "Coffee to start, Mrs. Montgomery?" A new voice broke through her observations. Eleanor looked up to see an unfamiliar waitress, mid-20s, with chestnut hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. Her name tag read Sarah. There was something in her warm smile that struck Eleanor as familiar, though she couldn't place it. "Yes, dear." "Black, please," Eleanor replied, reaching for her reading glasses to examine the menu she already knew by heart. When Sarah returned with the coffee, Eleanor had just finished arranging her napkin on her lap. As the young woman leaned forward to place the cup on the table, something caught the light, a pendant hanging from a delicate chain around her neck. Eleanor's hand froze mid-air. The coffee cup clattered slightly as Sarah set it down, oblivious to the older woman's sudden stillness. "Are you ready to order, Mom?" Sarah asked, but Eleanor couldn't speak. Her eyes remained fixed on the necklace, a small gold locket in the shape of a heart with an intricate floral pattern engraved on its surface. A pattern she knew intimately, a pattern she had traced with her own fingers countless times in another life. "Ma'am, are you all right?" Sarah's voice seemed to come from very far away. "That necklace," Eleanor finally managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Where did you get it?" Sarah's hand instinctively went to the locket. "Oh, this? It was my grandmother's. Actually, it's the only thing I have from her." A shadow crossed her face. "I never met her. My mom gave it to me before she passed away last year." Eleanor's heart hammered against her ribs. The diner seemed to fade around her as memories flooded back, memories she had locked away decades ago. "Your mother," Eleanor said, her voice trembling. "What was her name?" "Catherine," Sarah replied, looking slightly confused. "Catherine Miller, but everyone called her Kathy." At the sound of that name, Eleanor's coffee cup slipped from her suddenly nerveless fingers, shattering on the floor. The entire diner fell silent, all eyes turning toward their table. "Mrs. Montgomery," Sarah exclaimed, reaching for napkins. "Let me clean that up." "Are you sure you're okay?" But Eleanor wasn't listening. In that moment, her world had shifted entirely off its axis. "I'm fine," Eleanor insisted, though the tremble in her voice betrayed her. She waved away the concerned manager who had rushed over. "Please, I need to speak with Sarah, privately." The manager hesitated, then nodded, directing Sarah to take her break early. Eleanor requested they move to a booth in the far corner of the diner, away from curious eyes. Once seated across from each other, Eleanor's weathered hands clutched her purse with white knuckles. For a moment, she simply stared at Sarah, taking in every detail of the young woman's face, the gentle curve of her cheekbones, the slight dimple in her left cheek, the shape of her eyes. "Mrs. Montgomery, what's this about?" Sarah asked, her expression a mixture of concern and confusion. Eleanor took a deep breath. "That locket you're wearing. I gave it to my daughter on her 16th birthday, June 12, 1978. Sarah's eyes widened. Her hand went to the locket again, holding it protectively. That's impossible. This belonged to my grandmother. May I? Eleanor gestured toward the necklace with a shaking hand. Hesitantly, Sarah leaned forward. Eleanor carefully turned over the small heart-shaped pendant to reveal the back. Her eyes filled with tears as she confirmed what she already knew. There, etched in tiny script, were the initials EM to CM. Eleanor Montgomery to Catherine Montgomery. Eleanor whispered, "My daughter." Sarah pulled back, her face pale. But my mother's maiden name was Montgomery. She told me her parents died in a car accident before I was born. Eleanor shook her head slowly, tears now streaming down her wrinkled cheeks. No, dear, I'm very much alive. And your grandfather, James, he passed from a heart attack in 1995. This doesn't make sense, Sarah said, her voice rising slightly. Why would my mother lie? Why would she say you were dead? Eleanor closed her eyes briefly, the weight of decades of pain visible in the slump of her shoulders. Because I told her never to come back. A heavy silence fell between them. In the background, the diner continued its lunchtime bustle, completely unaware of the life-altering conversation happening in the corner booth. It was 1982, Eleanor continued, her voice distant as she retreated into memories. Catherine was 20, headstrong, rebellious. She dropped out of Dartmouth to pursue acting in New York. We argued constantly. Then she came home one weekend and announced she was pregnant. Sarah swallowed hard. With me. Eleanor nodded. James and I, we had expectations. Plans for Catherine's life. We offered to support her if she'd marry the father, a boy from a good family. Or at least consider adoption. Eleanor's voice cracked. We said terrible things. She said worse. The fight ended with me telling her not to come back until she'd fixed her mistake. Sarah flinched at the words, her hand instinctively moving to her stomach. It was the worst thing I've ever done, Eleanor whispered. By the time I came to my senses a few days later, she was gone. Changed her number. We hired investigators, but she disappeared completely. Eleanor wiped at her tears. Every year on your birthday, June 3rd, I would send cards, money, anything to her last known address, hoping they'd find her. Sarah stared at Eleanor, her expression unreadable. June 3rd is my birthday, she confirmed softly. I never stopped looking, Eleanor said, but after James died, I lost hope. I thought perhaps Catherine preferred to believe we were both gone. Sarah's eyes glistened with unshed tears. She never said much about her childhood, just that she grew up in Vermont and that this locket was precious to her. She wore it every day until she trailed off, fighting for composure, until she got sick. Eleanor's face crumpled. Catherine is truly gone, then? Sarah nodded. Breast cancer, last year. Eleanor's sob echoed through the diner, drawing stares. Once again. But neither woman noticed, locked as they were in a moment that bridged 40 years of separation. Asterisk, the manager of Rosemary's Diner, approached their table with hesitation, clearly uncomfortable interrupting, but aware of the growing line of waiting customers. Sarah needed to return to her shift. I get off at 4, Sarah told Eleanor, scribbling her phone number on a napkin. Maybe we could talk more then? Eleanor nodded, still dazed. I'll send my driver for you. As Sarah returned to work, Eleanor sat alone, her mind racing. She'd imagined this moment for decades, finding Catherine, making amends. Never had she imagined finding her granddaughter instead, with Catherine already gone. The pain was almost unbearable. When Eleanor's driver arrived to take her home, she instructed him to return for Sarah later. The ride to her sprawling Victorian mansion on the hill overlooking Lake Champlain, passed in a blur of memories and regrets. At precisely 4 o'clock, Sarah slid into the back seat of Eleanor's Bentley, still wearing her diner uniform. Her eyes were red-rimmed, suggesting she'd been crying during her shift. "I called my aunt during my break," Sarah said as they drove. "My mom's sister, Jennifer." She confirmed everything. "She said she always disagreed with Mom's decision to keep me from you, but respected her wishes." Eleanor's heart clenched. "Jennifer?" "Catherine stayed in touch with her sister?" Sarah nodded. "They weren't close, but they talked occasionally. Aunt Jeanne moved to California years ago. She said she promised Mom never to tell you about me." The car pulled through the ornate gates of the Montgomery estate. Sarah's eyes widened as she took in the manicured gardens and the imposing 3-story home. "You really are wealthy," she murmured. "Money means little when you've lost what truly matters," Eleanor replied softly. Inside, Eleanor led Sarah to her private study, a warm room lined with bookshelves and family photographs. Sarah moved immediately to a large portrait above the fireplace. "Is that her?" she asked, staring at the painting of a young woman with chestnut hair and a defiant smile, the same dimple in her left cheek that Sarah had. "Catherine at 18, Eleanor confirmed, just before she left for college. Sarah reached into her purse and pulled out a small photo album. "I have pictures too, if you'd like to see." Eleanor's hands trembled as she accepted the album. The first photo showed a slightly older version of Catherine, holding a baby wrapped in a pink blanket. "You," she whispered. "Mom kept a box of memorabilia," Sarah explained, her voice tight with emotion. "After she died, I found these letters." She pulled out a bundle tied with faded ribbon. "They're from you. Birthday cards, Christmas messages." She kept them all, even though she never cashed the checks or responded. Eleanor covered her mouth to stifle a sob. "She received them." "There's more," Sarah continued, pulling out another envelope. "Mom left me a letter to read after she passed. She explained everything, who my grandparents were, why she left, her regrets." Sarah's voice broke. "She was going to contact you before the cancer got bad. She wanted to make peace. But then things progressed so quickly, and she was afraid." "Afraid? Of what?" Eleanor asked. "Afraid you'd still reject her." "Reject us." Sarah wiped away a tear. In her letter, she wrote that her biggest regret was letting pride keep us apart. She hoped someday I might find you on my own. Eleanor moved to a small safe hidden behind a painting. With practiced movements, she opened it and removed a velvet jewelry box. "I've kept something too," she said, her voice barely audible. Inside, the box was a matching gold locket, identical to the one around Sarah's neck. Eleanor opened it to reveal a tiny photograph of a baby girl on one side and a teenage Catherine on the other. "I had it made after Catherine left," Eleanor explained. "I've worn it every day since, hoping that somewhere she was still wearing hers." Sarah's fingers touched her own locket. She never took it off. Even in the hospital, she insisted on keeping it. For a moment, the two women sat in silence, connected by the twin lockets and the woman they had both loved and lost. Asterisk the grandfather. Clock in the hall chimed 7 times as Eleanor and Sarah continued their conversation over dinner in the formal dining room. The massive mahogany table, designed to seat 20, made their intimate meal feel strangely out of place. "Tell me about your life, Sarah," Eleanor said, pushing aside her barely touched salmon. "Catherine's letter mentioned you were studying?" Sarah nodded, setting down her water glass. "Nursing school. I'm in my final year at UVM, working at the diner to make ends meet." "And your father?" Eleanor asked hesitantly. A shadow crossed Sarah's face. "Mom never told me much about him. His name was David Langston. They weren't together long. She said he wasn't ready to be a father. Sarah paused. He signed away his parental rights when I was a baby. Eleanor digested this information, remembering the name from decades ago. David had been a struggling musician Catherine met in New York, exactly the type of unsuitable match she and James had feared for their daughter. It was just Mom and me for as long as I can remember, Sarah continued. We moved around a lot when I was young. Chicago, Denver, Seattle. Mom worked as a theater manager, sometimes acted in small productions. It wasn't always easy, but she gave me everything she could. Where did you finally settle? Eleanor asked. Portland, Maine, about 8 years ago. That's where Mom got sick, Sarah's voice caught. 2 years battling cancer. I took time off school to care for her at the end. Eleanor reached across the table, gently taking Sarah's hand. I'm so sorry I wasn't there for both of you. After she passed, I needed a fresh start, Sarah explained. I transferred to UVM to finish my degree. It's strange. I think part of me always knew Vermont was important. Mom would sometimes talk about the fall colors here, the way the snow looked on the mountains. She loved autumn best, Eleanor whispered. She used to collect the most vibrant leaves and press them in books. Sarah's eyes lit up. She still did that. I have a whole collection of her pressed leaves. For a moment, they shared a smile of recognition before Sarah's expression grew serious. There's something else you should know, she said, setting down her fork. Something Mom told me in her final days. Eleanor braced herself, sensing the gravity in Sarah's tone. She was diagnosed with BRCA1, the breast cancer gene mutation. It's hereditary. Sarah's fingers unconsciously went to her locket. I've been tested. I have it too. Eleanor's hand flew to her mouth. Oh, Sarah. It doesn't mean I'll definitely get cancer, Sarah said quickly. But my risk is much higher. I have regular screenings, and after I finish nursing school, I'll need to make decisions about preventative measures. Eleanor felt her heart breaking all over again. Not only had she lost her daughter to a disease that might have been caught earlier with proper family medical history, but now her granddaughter carried the same risk. The medical bills for Mom's treatment took everything, Sarah continued. That's why I'm working while in school. The preventative surgeries I'll need aren't fully covered by my insurance. That ends today, Eleanor said firmly, her voice suddenly strong. I couldn't help Catherine, but I can help you. Whatever you need, the best doctors, preventative treatments, anything, it's yours. Sarah looked uncomfortable. I didn't tell you this for money, Mrs. Montgomery. Eleanor, she corrected, gently, and I know you didn't. But you're my granddaughter, my family. The money means nothing if I can't use it to help you. Sarah stared down at her plate. I'm not sure how to feel about any of this. Yesterday, I was just a waitress struggling to pay rent and finish school. Today, I find out I have a grandmother who lives in a mansion. I understand, Eleanor said. This is overwhelming for both of us. But Sarah, I've lost 40 years with my daughter that I can never get back. I don't want to lose a single day. More with you, Dot. Dot, if you'll let me be part of your life. The vulnerability in the elderly woman's voice seemed to touch something in Sarah. After a moment's hesitation, she nodded. I'd like that, she said softly. Mom would have wanted it too. I believe that now. Outside the dining room windows, the sun began to set over Lake Champlain, casting the room in a golden glow that matched the twin lockets both women wore. 2 weeks after their first meeting, Eleanor sat in the front row of the small campus auditorium, watching with pride as Sarah presented her senior nursing project. The young woman spoke confidently about palliative care improvements, inspired by her experience with her mother's illness. News of their reunion had spread quickly through Burlington's close-knit community. Eleanor had faced the whispers and stares with a newfound strength, no longer caring what her social circle thought. Some longtime friends expressed genuine happiness for her, while others seemed more interested in the gossip aspect of the wealthy Montgomery heir working as a diner waitress. But Eleanor had no patience for such pettiness anymore. She had wasted too many years on pride and appearances. After Sarah's presentation, they walked together across the autumn campus, fallen leaves crunching beneath their feet. "You were magnificent," Eleanor said, linking her arm through Sarah's. "Catherine would have been so proud." "I've been thinking about her constantly," Sarah admitted, wondering what she'd think of all this. They settled on a bench overlooking a small campus pond. Eleanor pulled an envelope from her purse. "I have something for you," she said. "You don't have to accept it, but I hope you will." Sarah accepted the envelope cautiously. Inside was a legal document, papers establishing a trust fund in her name. "It's enough to cover your medical needs, finish school without working, and secure your future," Eleanor explained. "And I've made arrangements to add you to my will." Sarah's eyes widened. "Eleanor, this is too much. We barely know each other." "We have time to know each other now," Eleanor replied. "But your health concerns can't wait. Neither can your education." Sarah studied the papers, conflicted. "I've always made my own way. Mom taught me to be independent." "Independence doesn't mean refusing help when it's offered with love," Eleanor said gently. "Catherine was right to teach you self-reliance. But perhaps her pride, our shared Montgomery stubbornness, kept her from reaching out when she needed help most." Sarah was quiet for a moment, then nodded. "Thank you," she said simply, carefully folding the papers. "There's something else," Eleanor continued. "A foundation James and I established years ago has a healthcare initiative. I'd like to create a new program, the Catherine Montgomery Memorial Fund, specifically for preventative care for hereditary cancers." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "Mom would have loved that." "And I hope," Eleanor said cautiously, "that you might consider moving into the house with me. It's far too large for one old woman, and the east wing has its own entrance. You could have privacy but also be close." The offer hung in the air between them. For a moment, Eleanor feared she had pushed too far, too fast. "Actually," Sarah said finally, "I've been thinking about what comes after graduation. The hospital in Burlington has an excellent oncology department. I could apply for a position there." "Is that a yes?" Eleanor asked, hope rising in her voice. Sarah smiled, that same dimpled smile that was so like Catherine's. "It's a yes, on one condition." "Name it," Eleanor replied. "Tell me everything about her," Sarah said. "The Catherine you knew before she left. I want to know my mother fully, the rebellious teenager, the Dartmouth student, all of it." Eleanor felt a weight lifting from her heart. "I have photo albums from every year, home movies, her childhood drawings, all saved, waiting for her to come home." "She did come home," Sarah said softly, touching her locket, "through me." As they sat together on the bench, a young couple walked by, pushing a stroller. The baby inside gurgled happily, waving tiny fists at the autumn leaves overhead. Eleanor watched them pass, and turned to Sarah with sudden urgency. "I need to ask you something important. Something I should have asked Catherine all those years ago, but was too blinded by my own expectations to consider." Sarah waited, attentive. "Are you happy, Sarah? With your choices, your path in life?" The question seemed to surprise the young woman, but after a moment's reflection, she nodded. "I am. Nursing isn't glamorous, but it gives my life meaning, especially after watching Mom's nurses make her final days more comfortable." Eleanor squeezed her hand. "And that's all that matters. That's what I should have told Catherine when she came to us. Instead of trying to fit her into our plans, we should have asked about hers." As they rose to leave, the golden afternoon light caught their matching lockets. creating twin flashes of brilliance against the autumn landscape. 1 year later, Eleanor sat in her garden, watching as Sarah hung decorations for the afternoon's event. The spring day was perfect. Warm sunshine, a gentle breeze carrying the scent of newly bloomed flowers across the expansive lawn. "Is the banner straight?" Sarah called, adjusting the large sign that read, "Catherine Montgomery Cancer Prevention Center, Grand Opening." "Perfect," Eleanor confirmed, smiling at her granddaughter's perfectionism, another trait she shared with Catherine. The past year had brought more changes than Eleanor could have imagined. Sarah had graduated with honors and taken a position at Burlington Medical Center. True to her word, she had moved into the east wing of the Montgomery mansion, bringing life back to the old house with her presence. Together, they had established the Catherine Montgomery Foundation, focusing on hereditary cancer awareness and prevention. Today marked the opening of their first dedicated clinic, a facility that would provide genetic testing, counseling, and preventative care regardless of patients' ability to pay. "The caterers just arrived," Sarah reported, climbing down from the ladder, "and Dr. Levinson called to confirm she'll be here to speak." Eleanor nodded approvingly. Rebecca Levinson was one of the country's leading BRCA specialists, now the medical director of their new center. She was also overseeing Sarah's preventative care plan. "Everything's coming together beautifully," Eleanor said. "Catherine would be so proud of what you've created." "What we've created," Sarah corrected, sitting beside her grandmother. Both women wore their heart-shaped lockets for the special occasion. The past year hadn't been without challenges. Sarah had undergone preventative surgery 3 months earlier, a difficult decision made easier by Eleanor's unwavering support. There had also been moments of tension as they navigated their new relationship, learning to balance Sarah's independence with Eleanor's protective instincts. But through it all, they had grown closer, filling in the missing pieces of Catherine's life between them like a puzzle finally being completed. "I found something yesterday that I want to show you," Eleanor said, pulling a small box from her pocket. Inside was a tarnished key. "What's this?" Sarah asked, examining it curiously. "The key to our lake cottage," Eleanor explained. "Catherine's favorite place as a child. We sold it after she left. Too many memories. But I tracked down the current owners. They're willing to sell it back to us." Sarah's eyes widened. "The cottage Mom used to talk about? With the rope swing over the water and the big stone fireplace?" Eleanor nodded, surprised. "She told you about it?" "She used to tell me bedtime. Stories about a magical cottage where the fish would eat breadcrumbs from your hand and fireflies lit up the shore at night. I always thought she was making it up." Sarah's voice caught. "I never realized it was a real place from her childhood." "Very real," Eleanor confirmed. "And it could be ours again, if you'd like. A place for new memories." Sarah squeezed her grandmother's hand. "I'd love that." The sound of arriving cars interrupted their moment. Guests were beginning to arrive for the ceremony. Medical professionals, community leaders, and patients who would benefit from the new center. As they stood to greet the first guests, a young woman approached them hesitantly. She looked to be in her early 30s, with a small boy clutching her hand. "Mrs. Montgomery? Ms. Miller?" she asked. "I'm Jessica Torres. I read about your foundation in the paper. I recently tested positive for the BRCA mutation, just like my mother before me." She glanced down at her son. "I'm worried about what it means for my future ... for his future." Eleanor and Sarah exchanged a look of understanding. "Come sit with us, Jessica," Sarah said warmly, leading her to a quiet spot away from the arriving crowd. "Let us tell you about the woman who inspired this center and how knowing your risk is the first step to changing your story." As Sarah began to explain the foundation's services to Jessica, Eleanor watched her granddaughter with pride. In her compassionate eyes and gentle manner, Catherine lived on. In the work they were doing together, her daughter's painful journey was being transformed into hope for others. Eleanor touched her locket, feeling its familiar shape against her fingertips. A single necklace, recognized by chance in a small-town diner, had changed everything. It had brought her not just the granddaughter she never knew, but a purpose for her remaining years, and healing for decades of regret. As the garden filled with people gathered to celebrate the opening of the center, Eleanor silently thanked Catherine for this final, precious gift, the chance to make things right, to love again, and to create something meaningful from their shared loss. The twin lockets, one around Eleanor's neck and one around Sarah's, caught the spring sunlight as they moved through the crowd together, shining like promises kept.